Hey, good morning to everybody. Happy Saturday. It's Daryl here. It is bright and freaking early, man. It's 3 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. Okay, this video, I'm a little nervous making this video. It's one of those times where my views go up, they go down. I've had this channel for, I don't know, maybe 6 years or so. And, I know there's a rhythm to my views. And right now, my views are kind of low. And this morning I got up early as usual, and I really couldn't find anything I really wanted to talk about, any stories that really stuck out. And it's times like this where I dig deep and I talk about something very personal. I've always had this urge to talk about things that I really shouldn't talk about, that I shouldn't admit. I've always had that kind of personality where I think that I've gone through a lot of things like other guys. I think there's a lot of things that I've shared, like growing up as a guy, that a lot of other guys would never admit to, but a lot of them have had similar experiences. Also, I'm 58 years old, and I know who I am at this point. I have no doubt. I'm secure in myself. I'm secure in my sexuality. I know who I am, and I really just don't care. So I'm willing to admit some stuff that I've never told anybody before, and I really, I know there's going to be comments and stuff like that, and I just don't care. It's like I know who I am, and I kind of get a kick out of admitting something that other people are afraid to admit. What am I talking about? Okay, recently I was out with my mom, and we were talking about growing up, Father's Day coming up and everything like that. And I grew up out in the woods, out in the forest. My father was the park ranger, and there was no houses, there were no neighbors. There was just one neighbor. There was a neighbor about maybe a quarter mile away. And after my father died, when I was 9, a family moved in there, English family that moved here from England, and they had a boy that was 1 year younger than me. And I lived there from the time I was, me and him were like best friends in this park when I was growing up. And we were kind of outcasts. We lived out in the forest, and there was just nobody. There was nobody else around. So we were just each other's best friends growing up. And there was no girls or anything like that. There was just the two of us. And I lived next door to him, so I think I was 13 or 14 years old. So recently, and then once I moved away from there, I kind of became more popular. Like when I was 13 or 14, I moved to near the city, and I lost a lot of weight. I started wearing the cool clothes like when I was 13, 14 years old, and I started dating and all that stuff. But before I moved, I had a relationship with this friend of mine that I've never admitted to. And just recently I was out with my mom, and we were talking about this guy, this guy I grew up with, from the time I was like, I'd say like 10, 11, 12 years old. And I hadn't seen him. I was wondering, I wonder where he is. So I looked him up on Facebook, and here's the thing. It struck me as I was surprised. He's gay, and he's lived a great life. I think he's actually a pilot. He's had a very successful life, but he is gay. He had a life partner, and he just recently lost his life partner. So I was reading all this stuff about him, and I see that face I haven't seen that face, the kid I grew up next to for, I haven't seen this face in like 45 years. And it just, the way it struck me, I was surprised that he was gay, and, he had a life partner and, and everything like that. And I had to ask myself if the stuff that we did when we were younger, if it had anything to do with him being gay. Now, you know where I'm going with this. When I moved, I started dating. I did a video where the first girl I ever kissed, it was this black Jamaican girl. And that's the first girl I ever kissed when I was 14 years old. And that's right when I moved away from the park and I moved into the city. And I started dating a lot of girls. I lost weight. I became very popular and all that. But before I moved there, let me fill you in on this. And I think a lot of guys are afraid to admit this. I think I wouldn't say a majority, but a high percentage of men probably grew up like this, probably had experiences like this when they were younger. Okay, so like I said, he was a year younger than me. I was about 12-ish or so, 11. And we'd ride our bikes around there was the park where my dad was the ranger, and like I said, he passed away. And men tended to leave magazines, like adult magazines, out laying around. They'd throw them out of their cars, and we would find them, and we'd go through them. And his father had magazines stashed in the closet, and we found those. Now, this is something I never talked about. And when I saw that he was gay, I wondered if it had something to do with this, if it had something to do with me. Like I said, now I mean, I'm 100% straight. I have no doubt about that. There's nothing I find sexy about or attractive about another man. If there was, I would admit it here. If I would admit it here before anywhere else, because I call this my confessional. I admit everything, but I really don't. I'm a straight guy. But okay, so we were growing up, and I remember just having a lot of curiosity and a lot of drive. Let's say, when you're going into puberty and everything, that's all you think about all day long. And it didn't help finding these magazines. And there was nobody home at his house. Both his parents worked. So we were up there, and I remember one of the first times the parents suggested there was a shower at the beach, and we didn't have enough change for both of us to take a shower. And the parents suggested that we shower together. Just like in the locker room, you're going to be going to high school soon, get used to it. And I saw that he was uncircumcised, and I was very curious about this, and like I said, we grew up, there was no opportunity to kiss girls or to, to play spin the bottle and stuff like that. We were out in the middle of the woods, and there was just the two of us. And things progressed. I remember looking through these magazines at his house, and we would get curious, and things happened. A lot of things. I remember we couldn't look each other in the face. It was too embarrassing to us, so we would cover up our face while the other person, we used to call it exploring. Like the other person would explore the other person. And this is the one thing I've never talked about. It's probably one of the most embarrassing things. He was the first, I can't believe I'm going to say this, he was the first person I ever kissed. I kissed a boy. And not just a peck, man. I mean, it was a full-on, I learned to French kiss another boy. Yeah. I've never admitted that before. I remember there was a dark room in his house. There was this room where there was no windows. So there was no light coming in. It was like a big walk-in closet. It was all carpeted. It was comfortable. It was like a little fort. And we go in there, because we couldn't see each other, so there was no embarrassment. And I remember we'd do this thing exploring. We would explore. He'd be on one side of the room, I'd be on the other. We'd be sans clothes, and we would just move towards each other using just our mouths to explore. Okay, and I remember, I can't believe I'm talking about this. Our lips met, and this was the first person I ever kissed, and it was a passionate kiss, and it wasn't just once. The first person I ever made out with was a boy. I admit that now. Like I said, and once I moved, and I was about 14 years old. Like I said, I moved to this other part of town, and I was always attracted to women. It was just, I remember the curiosity and the drive just being so high. There had to be a release for it. We were so curious and so fired up by these magazines that we found that, something had to happen. There had to be some outlet for it. Some outlet for our curiosity, for everything we were feeling. And once I turned 14, I started dating. And here's the sad thing. I moved, I had a normal, I wouldn't call it normal, but a heterosexual, from 14 on. And I had my guy friends and everything. We'd play sports, we'd work out, go to the beach, and I dated girls. And I think I was still ashamed of what I did. And I used to encourage my new friends, the guys that I hung out with, the cool guys, to make fun of him. And I feel freaking terrible about that now. And I gave him such a hard time all through high school. I found this new bunch of, I'm ashamed to even say, I'm more ashamed to say this than admitting that he was the first person I kissed. And I used to encourage my new friends to pick on him because I was ashamed. of what happened, you know. And then in the years after high school, I forgot all about him. So just recently, I found out that he is gay, and he just, unfortunately, he just lost his life partner, who apparently he loved very much. But this kind of brought up a lot of questions in my mind, you know, because when I moved, I had, you know, I went to my normal attraction, women. You know, when I was 14 and I moved to the city, and I don't think he ever moved, and he stayed there. And I have to wonder, you know, did I don't know if this is narcissistic, but did I play a part, you know, in his becoming gay, you know, because in him not moving to a city like I did and having the chance to at 14 to start dating girls, you know, is that the only experience he had? And therefore, he grew up to be attracted to guys. You know, I asked myself that. You know, I don't know if that's narcissistic or arrogant to think that maybe, you know, his sexuality is based on me from back then. But I'm kind of questioning that. Here's a weird thing, too. I just remembered. Me and my friends were in a head shop when we were in high school, and there was you know, adult movies in the back, but it was a head shop. You know, me and my friends were shopping for stuff like that, you know, rolling accessories, and, you know, we were in high school. And out of the back room came my friend, and he was with another guy, you know, and I didn't say anything to the guys I was with, you know, that I recognized him or anything. And I wondered, I was like, wow, this, you know, he's continuing on even in the later teen years with this lifestyle, with this, you know. And like I said, with me, it was just a curiosity thing. It was for lack of other choices, you know. And I don't know if this makes any sense to you guys, but I wish him well. I really do. And if he ever sees this video, or if I ever get the chance to talk to him, I'd like to truly apologize for what I did to him in high school, how I was cruel and mean because of my own insecurities. And I feel I owe him an apology for that. I hope he's happy. I do. And I'm sorry that he lost his life partner. I am. But we grew up very different, even after having shared our first guy kiss. I can't believe I'm saying this on video. There's a good chance I'm going to delete this video later today because I'm going to freak out that I actually said this on video. There it is. I bet you I guarantee a lot of guys, I bet you there's guys even watching this that had similar experiences. Let's see in the comments. So will you admit it? All right. Have a good Saturday.